Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me this evening. This evening, I'm going to be looking at manipulation. Going to be looking at the different ways people are manipulated, very common ways that people are manipulated. Sometimes they're so common that you wouldn't even see it. You don't even know it's there. It's just become so normalized, if you will. Um, and these manipulation tactics are not just restricted like narcissistic people, Machiavellian types. This kind of manipulation, well, you even see salespeople using these tactics. Really, the core of what I'm getting at tonight is how when you're being manipulated, a lot of the times it's your emotions that are being manipulated. Okay, it's your emotions that are targeted. Your embarrassment, your excitement, your shame, things like that. So it's largely about triggering your emotions because sometimes someone might not openly ask for something, but they might do or they might say something. And what that does is that triggers an emotion in you. I put out a video a while ago about dry begging. It was a term that I'd heard about, and someone had asked the question. And when someone is dry begging, they'll do it for different reasons. Sometimes people find it difficult to maybe just ask for help. Maybe they've been rejected, refused a lot of times. They find it hard to maybe form connection. But in terms of narcissism, when it comes to dry begging, it's more like dropping a lot of hints, but doing it in a way that the other person feels obligated to help. So they might do things like they might say things like, oh, I'm never going to get this finished in time and I'm going to be in so much trouble, rather than just say, I'm struggling here. Could you help me out with this? Because this is the thing, even when it comes to narcissistic people, sometimes people find it difficult to ask for help. So they will drop a series of hints, hoping that you're going to pick up on the clues. Other times, some people, the thought of just asking, it wouldn't even enter their head. It's just they're so used to manipulating. Everything has to be a game. Everything has to be a scheme. Everything has to be a scam. So rather than just openly ask, they will hint, they will insinuate. Okay. Another way to identify this is if you're talking to someone, if they're asking for something you're not that comfortable with, again, they're trying to manipulate you. A lot of the time, what they will do is they will use emotional reasoning and emotive arguments rather than just be factual, to the point, or whatever, or again, even just ask. They will use emotional arguments. It's all about how you're triggering them, how you're upsetting them, how you're a horrible person for not doing whatever it is they want you to do. Even if whatever, I'm going to think of an example. They want you to lie for them, okay? They're in trouble. They want you to lie for them to get them out of trouble. You know that if you lie, that's maybe going against your very core. You know that if you lie, you're really not helping them. They maybe do need to face the consequences. You know that if you lie, no one's going to believe it, and you're going to get into trouble as well because you're colluding with them. But even though they want you to lie, they will make it look as if you're being the bad person for not compromising yourself, for not lying for them, because they're going to face such terrible consequences. And they only did it because the cat's not well or something ridiculous like that. Um, so they will use emotive language and emotive arguments. Bad people say no. No is a bad word. That means being selfish and so on. Your compliance, you're giving them what they want, is going to take away their anxiety, is going to make them feel better. They have been triggered somehow. Okay. So they're using emotional language and emotional arguments rather than just factual arguments, things that are grounded in reality and so on. So this evening, I'm looking at the three main ways they do this when they're targeting your emotions. And the first thing they will target will be your fear. Okay. Well, not in any particular order, but it's the first one that I'm picking. They will target your fear. And it's usually the fear of consequences if you don't do what they say. If you think of that salesperson I was telling you about, when it comes to the fear, it would be, are you crazy? Do you not want to save money? Things like that. So there could be the targeting of that, the fear that you're going to lose out somehow in the long run, that there's maybe only one or two of them left, and if you don't buy it, and so on. Other times, there could be the fear of maybe being excluded, or maybe being ostracized or ignored, or being cancelled, or whatever, if you don't do what they say, if you don't give them what they want, because everybody agrees with them, everybody is on their side. Okay? One moment. So what they're targeting is your fear of public opinion. They're fearing your reputation taking a bit of a hit, taking a bit of a knock. They're targeting your fear of your status being eroded or something, or being diminished somehow, if you don't do what they say, if you don't give them what they want. Other times they could be targeting your fear of the consequences, for instance, their anger, their wrath, their disapproval, um, whatever punishment. Um, they will make some kind of consequence. If you don't do this, then I'm going to tell people about the time you did that. So it's your fear. Okay, they make you afraid to say no. There can also be the fear of missing out. Sometimes we all have this, by the way. Again, just like that salesperson, if you don't buy this, your life will be miserable. Everybody else has one. It's the latest thing, and this little thing's going to change your life, and so on. Other times you could be targeted. It's the fear of missing out on something, maybe missing out on some amazing memory, or something that everyone else is going to enjoy, everyone else is going to benefit from somehow. So when they're targeting your fear, a lot of the time, it's these consequences, okay? So be mindful of what those consequences are, okay? Sometimes there might be real consequences. Sometimes there might just be threatened ones. Again, I tell everyone what you're really like. By the way, if anyone ever tells you or ever threatens you that they're going to tell people what you're really like, what they really mean is, I'm going to tell people about the things I blame you for. Okay. And that's something completely different. Okay. So the first thing they target is your fear, that emotional side of it, our fear, the fear of the loss of status, being ostracized, things like that. The second thing they target is your guilt. Bad people say no. Terrible things will happen if you don't do this. How could you, after all I've done for you? What about that time I made you a cup of coffee? They target your guilt. You might hear threats like, if you don't, then I'm going to do this. I'll hurt myself. I'll hurt other people. I'll hurt you. I'll hurt whatever. What they're really doing is trying to convince you that you are responsible for their actions and their feelings. Okay. Whatever it is you're doing is causing them huge anxiety. You won't give them access to your passwords for social media and stuff, because there's nothing there that's any of their business. But they're making you responsible for their anxiety because you won't share those details. They could be targeting, going back to what I was saying a moment ago, targeting your guilt that you are responsible for them. If I can illustrate it this way, it might make sense to you. When someone is holding you responsible for their actions, if you were to imagine they lift a frying pan and they start beating themselves across the head with it, and they're telling you, look at what you're making me do. Now, when you put it in that kind of context, it's nonsense. Okay, you're not responsible for what they're doing. That being said, we don't always know what someone is capable of, but we're still not responsible, okay, for their actions. So again, there can be the fear of public opinion, our guilt that we didn't help out somehow, we didn't do this. When that happens, though, what you normally find is they've only told half of the story. Okay, they've told the version that suits them. Even if they're using rules and things like that, you broke the rules or whatever, what you often find is they're the rules that they think should be there, the rules that they think need to be enforced, as opposed to maybe the actual rules. Either that or the rules are twisted somehow to make you feel as if you've done a bad thing. So they're targeting your guilt. There's a lot of how could you and bad people do that and so on. The last thing that I'll talk about this evening when it comes to what they target is your sense of duty, your sense of obligation. Okay. Again, good people do this, good people do that. Just like I mentioned a moment ago with your guilt, sometimes you'll see overlaps in these things. They're holding you responsible for the things they do and say, for the things that happen to them, even their own chaotic, crazy behavior that gets them into trouble. They hold you responsible for not taking responsibility for them, for not fixing it for them, for not helping them, and things like that. So they hold you responsible. Another way they can target your sense of obligation could be, just like with the guilt, you owe me. Now, they may well have done you a favor at some point, but they will behave as if you're in some debt of gratitude to them, as if they did something absolutely wonderful that saved your life or whatever. You owe them, okay? They will lead you to believe that you owe them something special. But that being said, even if you do owe them a favor, it doesn't necessarily mean you should do whatever it is they ask. Whatever it is they ask might involve something that goes against your core, like lying for them or something. Targeting your obligation as well. Again, bad people would say no. This would be really helpful. Other people need this. Other people are dependent on this. If you don't do that, then all these other people are going to struggle somehow. A lot of the time, again, going back to the emotive arguments, a lot of the times these things are grossly exaggerated. Holding you responsible if something fails or something didn't work out because you didn't do whatever it was they demanded you do. I've just realized this isn't plugged in and I'm probably going to lose power. Hold on a second. There we go. Keep on saying. Bet you wish you had one of those YouTubers that's really slick and knows exactly what he's doing. But sure, there you go. Up and running again. Yeah, going back to the sense of obligation. Things feel it's because of you, because you didn't do X, Y, or Z, because you wouldn't comply, because you wouldn't do that special thing, because you wouldn't fill in the blank. Holding you responsible for whatever harebrained scheme that they have that either isn't going to work or didn't work in the first place. There could be, because you maybe have time on your hands, or maybe you have various resources, maybe you have contacts somewhere, maybe you have skills or whatever. You have the means, whatever it is that they're looking for. You might find them talking to you again as if you are responsible for doing it, just because you need to do this for them, just because you're free during that time. Okay. Doesn't matter that you don't want to do it. Doesn't matter that it's not in your best interest. Doesn't matter that it's none of your business. Doesn't matter that you don't feel that comfortable with it. They might manipulate you again, tapping into your emotions, your guilt, your fear, things like that, but also your sense of obligation, your sense of duty. These are things you should be doing for them. If you're dealing with a narcissistic person, remember it's someone with a huge sense of entitlement, unearned entitlement, by the way. It's theirs by right. Everybody should be giving them special treatment and so on. And that includes you. Just because you have a little bit of time on your hands, you should be using that time for their benefit. Okay. If you have money, you should be lending it to them. You should let them borrow it. If you have a particular skill, you should be fixing that thing for them. You should be repairing that thing for them. If you work in a certain place, you should be introducing them to those very important people or whatever. So let's start that again. So they are the three main ways they attack your fear, which is the fear of consequences usually. They attack your guilt, which is your conscience, really. And they attack your sense of obligation, lead you to believe you have some kind of duty or obligation to do whatever it is they want. When they're doing this, remember what I said earlier, you will often hear emotional language and emotive arguments, usually about the terrible things that will happen if you don't. If you don't give them what they want, if you don't do what they say. This could be, their distress, their anxiety, their trauma, whatever it is. This could be the terrible things that will happen to these people over here that you know nothing about, you've never met, or maybe have nothing to do with it. It could be, the terrible things that will happen to them if you don't pull them out of this hole that they have dug for themselves. Okay. They will use emotive, emotional language. If they don't get what they want, again, they're usually very emotional kind of arguments. You might get tears. You might get them rolling about on their back, kicking their legs in the air, squealing. You might get outrage. You might get threats. You'll get a lot of things. But as I say, they are emotive, emotional arguments rather than factual ones. A good sign that you're dealing with someone narcissistic or Machiavellian, manipulative, okay? A good sign is they don't try to persuade, they try to coerce. Now, yeah, you'll get word salad, you'll get nonsensical reasoning, you will get illogical logic and things like that. But it's all largely aimed at coercion and manipulation as opposed to persuasion. If you're talking with someone and they are trying to persuade you of something, you will probably find they're using facts, they are using reason and things like that. If they don't have that, they will still try to be reasonable when they're talking with you. They will not be insulting you, calling you stupid. They will not be telling you what a bad person you are for not going along with it. They might be talking about something that just feels it's very deeply rooted in them, something that's deeply important to them. But again, it's not going to be coercion. So that just came into my head there. I thought it might be worth sharing. Yeah, the difference between coercion and persuasion. Look at those things. So when you recognize that a lot of these arguments, a lot of this stuff is maybe dropping hints, insinuating things, making little threats that what possibly could happen to you if you don't comply, things that will happen that you will be held responsible for, things like that. When you get a sense of that and you recognize that it is your emotions that are being targeted, and they're being targeted in different ways, but they're the three main ways: your fear, your guilt, and your sense of obligation, your sense of duty. When you get a sense of that, sometimes it's a bit easier to handle. And I'll give you an example. I mentioned like salespeople earlier. Have you ever met one of those salespeople that you can't get rid of them? You cannot get them to shut up. You cannot get them to leave you alone. Doesn't matter what it is you're selling. You're not interested. You don't want it. You don't need it. You can't afford it. But it's like they have already decided you're going to buy it. And you have to try to convince them that you're not. You have to persuade them. You have to explain to them why you're not going to buy it. And no matter what you do, they're able to undermine your no. Well, it's the same kind of thing. Sometimes it just comes down to remaining calm and staying focused. Yeah, that little thing there would change my life, but my life is kind of fine as it is at the moment. Or I'll wait until I have the money and then I might think about buying something like that. When we remain calm and focused, that's a really good way to disarm emotional arguments, emotive arguments, especially when emotional language is thrown out. They start accusing you of things, they start throwing words out there, usually words that end with ist or phobic, things that terrify you. You don't want to be labeled as something like that. When you remain calm and you remain focused and you stick to your original point, you don't over explain yourself, you give an account, you give your yes or no. You don't necessarily have to go further than that. When you're calm and focused, that disarms the emotional part, because they have to maybe say the same thing again. But when they do that, it's already lost its power. Okay. So you remain calm, you remain focused. Just like that salesperson, I'm not interested. And it doesn't matter what they come back with. I'm still not interested. I'm not interested. I'm not interested. Sound like a broken record if you have to. You don't have to explain why you're not buying something you don't want. Okay. They're going to keep on going at you why you should, but you don't necessarily have to over explain yourself. If you find yourself being manipulated as well and you recognize it as manipulation, when you're calm and when you're focused, it's not that you're ignoring the manipulation, but you might be trying to look at what is underneath it, what's behind it. Like I said earlier, sometimes someone could be maybe dry begging, someone just struggles to ask for help. They're hoping someone is going to reach out, support them, advise them, give them whatever it is. Other times, again, maybe it is just manipulation. They're trying to bring up that sense of obligation in you to do whatever it is they want. So when you try to look at what's beneath it and you see what's going on, or even if you're not sure what's going on, just ask. If they are dropping hints about what a terrible thing's going to happen if this other thing here isn't fixed and if someone doesn't come and help out with that, just ask them, what is it you're actually telling me? What is it you actually want? Are you asking me for help? Give them the opportunity to tell you what's really going on, okay? Because as I say, some people might just struggle asking for help, and that could be for a variety of different reasons. It could be codependency issues. There could be a lot of different things. They could have experienced a lot of neglect, so they find it hard to ask. When you just put that out there, are you asking me to help you? You're giving them the opportunity to verbalize what's going on. That comes down to that would be the same when it comes to maybe a narcissistic person. Whatever it is they're asking for could be genuine. Okay. They could really need help with something. They could really benefit from something, whatever it is. They're just doing what they always do. They're just trying to manipulate, because everything, as I say, could be a scheme and a scam to them. When you're asking them what it is they actually want or what it is they're trying to tell you, you're giving them their own work to do. You're not trying to decode anything. You're not trying to interpret anything. Let me put it to you this way. Going back to the dropping hints and the insinuating that they're in trouble if this thing here isn't fixed or done by, say, 5 o'clock at work. And you jump in and help them. They're not necessarily going to be grateful for that. They might not necessarily say, thank you very much, I really appreciate that. Because they, in their mind, they didn't actually ask you. All they said was, I'll be in trouble if this isn't fixed. There will be disaster if this isn't done, whatever it was. That's all they did. They didn't actually ask you. So they're trying to free themselves of any kind of obligation. They didn't ask you for anything. Give them their own work to do. When you're doing that, pardon me, when you're asking them and when you're giving them their own work to do, you are still using your empathy, but you're using it with boundaries, okay? You're not jumping in to try and fix. You're not jumping in to try and rescue. You can still be empathetic, empathetic, but you're doing it with boundaries, okay? Going back to what I was saying about earlier, complaining about, whatever it is you're doing is causing them great anxiety. And whatever it is you're doing could be just innocuous. You could be eating a piece of toast or something. You are not responsible for their thoughts or their feelings any more than you're responsible for their actions either, okay? You're not. That being said, we do have to take some kind of responsibility in the sense that we can't throw rocks at someone, say it's not me that's hurting you, it's the rocks, because that's what they would do. No, we recognize it's maybe not the answer they wanted. It's not the one they were hoping for, but we didn't set out to hurt them. We don't own their disappointment. And this is the thing about disappointment, again, going back to targeting our guilt. Disappointment isn't a nice feeling. No one likes to be disappointed, and we don't like to disappoint others either because we know how it feels. But we're not responsible, again, for other people's reactions to things. We can empathize, we can have compassion, but we do not own their disappointment. It's not something we did to them, okay? And to the best of my knowledge, I could stand to be corrected. To the best of my knowledge, disappointment isn't fatal. People generally get over it very quickly, okay? So that's just something to think about. We are not responsible for other people's thoughts, feelings, or actions. We can recognize it's not the answer they wanted, it's not the one they were hoping for. We're not responsible for that. And it doesn't mean we don't care. I always say there's a huge difference between caring about and caring for. When it comes to someone, again, maybe targeting your fear, your guilt, things like that, and your sense of obligation, that they get so easily triggered that you should be walking on eggshells around them. You don't want to do or say the wrong thing. You don't want to upset them. You'd best give them all your passwords so they can check you're not up to anything, whatever it is. Going back to the empathy, but the empathy with boundaries. This is the important thing. Empathy with boundaries, because without boundaries, it can be self-destructive. You're not responsible for their triggers either. You haven't deliberately set out to hurt them. You have not done anything to trigger whatever their outrage, their anxiety, their distress, whatever it is. You have not deliberately set out to do anything like that. Your no, if you want to put it in simple terms, your no is not a trigger, okay? If they are very easily triggered, where they get upset, anxious, distressed, angry, whatever it is, then it's up to them to go and learn how to manage their triggers. Because this is the thing, when you start wrapping people in cotton wool and you start modifying your behavior because you've been led to believe that you're responsible for how they feel and how they act, you're not actually helping them. More often than not, you're making things worse. Sometimes you're making it worse for them, but you're also making it worse for yourself. Okay, so you are not responsible for their triggers, even when they're targeting your sense of duty and obligation. Okay, it's up to you to keep me safe. It's up to you to stop me getting angry and distressed and all the rest of it. No, I'm pretty sure it isn't. I can support you and I can encourage you, but it's not for me to keep you emotionally safe. When they learn to manage their own triggers, you can certainly encourage them and support them. Okay. You can do different things then. It's something you could, if it's a relationship, a partnership, something like that. Yeah, maybe you can work on that together. But you're not helping anybody in the long run, okay, by just giving them what they want. So, a little quicker than usual this evening, going through the 3 different ways. There are others, as I mentioned, but the 3 ways that you are targeted to be manipulated, the things that they target. To say, your sense of fear, you fear what will happen if you don't comply, the fear of the consequences, which, as I said, could be their anger, their outrage, your reputation being savaged, people seeing you in a negative light, being ostracized, being ignored, things like that. There's your sense of guilt, that you feel or you led to believe that you are responsible for what other people think, feel, and what they do. Bad people do bad things, good people do good things. No is a bad word, stuff like that. And your sense of obligation, the things that you've been led to believe you have to do, the things you've been led to believe you are responsible for. Okay. That's the thing about responsibility. There's a lot of argument and debate at the moment. People talk about responsibility as if it's some kind of, it's either one thing or the other. People sometimes talk about personal responsibility. People sometimes talk about, what would you call it? Maybe collective, joint responsibility, maybe. It's not either or, it's both. Okay. We have individual personal responsibilities, but we also have responsibilities to society at large, if you will. Um, other people, our families, our partners, and the places that we work and the communities that we live in. So it is a bit of both. It's not one or the other. When your sense of duty or obligation is being targeted, quite often it's your obligation and duty towards other people. Your sense of responsibility towards yourself, things like self-care, boundaries, your own best interest and stuff like that. You're led to believe that's a bad thing, but it's only a bad thing because it means they're not getting what they want. Okay. I do go off on tangents, don't I? It's the nature of having a brain like mine. It rarely sticks to the one thing. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting this evening, looking at the ways that we are targeted emotionally, emotively, bringing up different feelings in us. I said earlier on as well, I mean, other ways they can do it is your excitement and your fear of missing out. Okay. It's another way that you can be manipulated. This is a once in a lifetime thing, and this is going to be amazing. What do you see? You're going to love this. Do you remember that time we did that and you really enjoyed it? Oh, well, what do you see when we do this here? So yeah, a lot of the time when you're being manipulated, it is your emotions that are targeted, and they're targeted in different ways. When you recognize that, again, we can have empathy, compassion, but we can stay grounded in the here and now. We can stay grounded in reality, and sometimes it is easier to handle, especially if we remain calm and we have them do their own work rather than us do it for them. So if anybody has any questions, I'm going to go back to the beginning. If anybody has any questions, I would appreciate a question mark because it will be easier for me to find. So where is my little chat box thing? Here we go. Now then. Where we go to? Stories told and repeat. Hello, Jane. Hello, Avi. Hello, On My Way. Hello, Justin. Hello, Elizabeth. They say that you owe them, but it's good to them as it's skin in the game. Childish play. Just don't play. There is no game. That's how I see it. Yeah, Elizabeth, that is a good point. You disengage. You don't play in the first place. Sometimes, people talk about how do you win against manipulative, narcissistic types. You win by disengaging or not engaging in the first place. That's why I said earlier about remaining calm. When you're not... when you're calm, when you're collected, when you're responding rather than reacting emotionally, that disarms their argument. That takes it out of them. You're not afraid of being called names. You're not afraid of being called selfish. You're not afraid of being called whatever it is. You stick to the point and you ask them factual questions. Hello, Siobhan. Hello, Carol. Hello, Ellie. On My Way says they should win the lottery even if they didn't buy a ticket. Yeah. That's right. So, as I say, I'm just scrolling through here and I am looking for something with a question mark. So if anyone has any questions, I will get to it. Carol says 3 faces of narcissistic control: hero, victim, or bully. Yeah. If you think of Cartman's drama triangle, there's rescuer, there's persecutor, and there's victim. Same thing. Now, we all go through that triangle sometimes, even in one conversation in our own head. But narcissistic people do tend to go around that quite a lot. They will play the victim in order to persecute, but it will also play the rescuer. In other words, being the hero. What they did was for the greater good. They are so noble and all the rest of it. So, yeah. S. Thomas says, I'm a retired salesperson. Well, I hope you weren't one of those salespeople that wouldn't let me out the door until I bought something. Okay. Calm confidence, which is something we can work on, something we can practice. Siobhan says, something I'm still working on, not explaining. Tomorrow's video, Siobhan, a video coming out tomorrow at 6:30 UK time. And I'm looking at, it was a question that came up from the last live stream, just prior to when I picked the topic. Oh, I can't even remember what I talked about last time. The question was, why do people who have been in narcissistic relationships overshare? So I've made a video on that. That's actually coming out tomorrow, and I feel quite good about myself. I've made a video based on a question that was asked a week ago. Sometimes they're about 6 months ago, and I feel bad about that. But tomorrow's video is looking at that. It's why, and I'm breaking it down into 3 parts: why people overshare, why they over-explain, and why they over-apologize, sometimes for things they've nothing to apologize for. So I'm looking at what narcissistic coercion, abuse, and neglect does to us internally, the different responses that come up, how our communication becomes affected. I'm also looking at the underlying stuff that's going on as well, but I'm also looking at some ideas to help move forward with that. And it's something I said earlier on. You're not responsible for people's reactions to your no. Doesn't mean you don't care or anything, but you're not responsible for them. So I hope there's something in that you would find useful. That'll be out tomorrow, as I say, at 6:30, about the over-explaining, the oversharing, and the over-apologizing. Okay. As Thomas says again, I did my best to be an honest salesperson, but was unique or alone in this industry. Not necessarily, because I know 2 salespeople and they're actually pretty good, very decent people. That being said, they've never sold me anything, so I don't know what they're like professionally. But no, they're good, decent people. Okay. So Justin says, I've started to stand up for myself. They hate it, but will never admit it. They accuse me of being the bad guy for seeing through the nonsense. I'm the bad guy for wanting better for myself. Justin, it's okay to be the bad guy. Don't worry about being the bad guy. It doesn't feel good, especially when the bad guy's reputation, they start telling other people what a bad guy you are. It doesn't feel good. But one way or another, you're always going to be the bad guys in someone's story. So you might as well be the bad guy to the person who can't get what they want from you. Again, it doesn't feel good, but it's okay. I always like that quote from the Count of Monte Cristo whenever he's escaping prison and his friend says to him, when you get out, he says, don't commit the crimes for which you now serve the sentence. And that's fine. You don't have to become a real bad guy. You don't have to become a monster. So you are going to be the bad guy, but just don't be the bad guy that they think you are or that they tell you that you are. Don't worry about it. Here's probably a better way of looking at it. For every billionaire madman that lives in a hollowed out volcano, James Bond is the bad guy. So be the bad guy. Let me see. Where do we get to? Siobhan says you're not being a fixer. Something I've been working on too. There's a difference between supporting someone and trying to fix them. Difference between encouraging someone and trying to rescue them. Yeah. That's what I said about empathy with boundaries. Okay. Because sometimes without boundaries, narcissistic relationships, your boundaries are often eroded. So there is empathy there, but there's no boundaries there. Okay. Which is why we keep doing more and more and more and complying more and more and giving up more and more in the hope that this time it's going to fix them. Where do we get to? Disappointment isn't fatal. Love that. Yeah, I like that one too. The best of my knowledge, it's certainly not fatal. No. Never see anyone lying in a hospital bed. What's the matter with you? I was disappointed. It really doesn't happen. Okay. Any questions coming up? Again, if I see a question mark, then it's easier for me to find. Oh, here's one. Oh, before that, Avi says, thank you, Darren. Love your channel. Big plus. My Narc ex doesn't watch it up to his Narc game. Okay. I'm glad you find it helpful, Avi. Thank you. Glad you're getting something from it. So Rita is asking, is there any statistics on what percentage of repeated crimes that have been committed by malignant narcissists? How many percentage of narcs do become criminals since they obviously lack the normal boundaries? That's a very interesting question. I'm not sure what the statistics are. I did once speak to a forensic psychiatrist, and he was saying that when he goes into prisons and he's assessing people, he says the majority of cases would be antisocial personality. So you would see a lot of sociopathy, psychopathy, things like that with antisocial personality, but narcissism would be a key component of that as well. Narcissistic people, just pure narcissism, I'm really not sure about. I'm not sure what the statistics would be, but what I would say as well, what you often find is just like with the antisocial personality, there could be a comorbidity of different things going on. Sometimes when it comes to narcissism, if you're just looking at narcissism, nothing else, and I'm not talking about a personality disorder, but more deeply ingrained traits. I don't say this to trivialize it. I certainly don't want to diminish anyone's experience. Sometimes you're looking at someone like David Brent from The Office, someone like Alan Partridge. I know they're ridiculous comedy characters, but they show deeply ingrained narcissistic traits. So what you see are people who are deluded, who think that they're super talented, who think that everyone should love them, that think that they're superior, that think that they're, amazing and things like that. And they have this huge sense of entitlement. In cases where you see them in comedy, they're often pompous buffoons and so on. They usually end up the butt of jokes, as I say, Alan Partridge, David Brent. But sometimes that's what you're looking at. A lot of the time, and I'm not talking about personality disorders, but a lot of the time that's what we're looking at. It's when we go right up the scale, either into a personality disorder. The key word is disorder. It's a disorder of narcissism. Everything is cranked up to warp speed. It's persistent, it's pervasive, it's all day and every day. But then there can be other things co-occurring as well. As I say, there could be quite commonly with criminals, you would see antisocial traits as well. So no, I haven't really answered your question, but that's the best I can because I'm really not sure what the actual statistics would be. What I would say is when it comes to narcissistic people, they can be very entitled, as you know, and they lack the normal boundaries. You're absolutely right. And sometimes there can be poor impulse control. That being said, sometimes it's not that they're necessarily afraid. Maybe this would be more psychopathy, but it's not that they're necessarily afraid to break the rules, but they know that breaking the rules wouldn't be in their best interest. They might not be afraid to go to prison, but they don't particularly want to because they're having such a pretty good life at the moment or whatever. So it's not necessarily that they fear consequences, but they understand the consequences, and the consequences don't suit them. So again, I know that doesn't really answer your question, but it's the best that I can think of at the moment to be able to answer it. I'm not sure what the actual statistics would be. Where do we get to? Ellie Wynn says, thank you, Darren. Very helpful. You're welcome. Again, glad you find it helpful. Yvette and Jorgen Larson. Hi, Darren. We're all thankful that you have a brain like yours. I hate having my brain because my brain does not function properly. I keep missing words. I keep losing words. Sometimes I ask the question, I can't even remember what the question is. It's only that they're written down that it makes sense to me. So I wish I had a brain that worked. Works enough for me. Where do we get to? Anything? Again, if I see question marks, they are easy. Easier for me to find if I see question marks. Okay. Caroline, pathological loneliness is a problem. How can we connect with safe people, please? Um, Loneliness is a huge issue, and it's something that is being looked at a lot more recently. When I was looking into the personality types and the research that goes into looking at online trolling and looking at the incel culture and internet subcultures and things like that, loneliness was playing a huge part. And it's something that I hadn't thought about until I was looking at it. Loneliness can affect people in a lot of different ways, but there can also be a dark side to loneliness. With loneliness, people are more open to being radicalized by things, being brought into cult-like movements and so on. So there is a dark side to loneliness. Loneliness, though, is often, it's not so much a lack of company, because someone could be maybe going into work every day. They see people every day. They could have maybe 100 people around them. Loneliness is like a lack of connection with the people around you. And when you're saying about finding safe people, it's how do we discern what a safe person is? Because a lot of manipulative people turn up as the most amazing people you'll ever meet. They're lovely, they're caring, they'll do anything you want. And this is how, again, how people get roped into cults and movements like that, because you will have a sense of belonging. We will look after you, and so on. So it isn't always easy to discern what a safe person is at first. But what I would say is, going back to the empathy with the boundaries, you can use that in a lot of different ways. What we do is we form connections, but we form connections in small little steps. We take time to get to know people. Relationships aren't formed straight away. We're not all best friends straight away. We don't always feel safe with people straight away. We form them in little small ways. Now that could be maybe joining a group, a club, a book club, an amateur dramatic society, or enrolling in a class to learn something. We start to meet the people that are there as well. And it just begins with things like hello. Over a period of time, we might talk, we might chat. Relationships kind of form that way. I wish I could give you a definitive answer. I really don't have one. Sometimes it does come down to taking a risk. But this is the thing about taking a risk. You risk failing every bit as much as you risk succeeding. With healthy boundaries, you'll start to recognize if something doesn't feel good and be able to maybe pull away from it and maybe try a different direction. Again, I wish I could give you a more definitive answer than that, but little small tiny steps, and allow relationships to form. Get to know people. It also means taking a risk and allowing them to get to know you. They don't have to know everything. They don't have to know all your secrets. They don't have to know your whole life history. Just let them get to know you as a person. But you get to know them as well. Okay. So where did we get to? Kind of jump there. Darren, for some reason, I'm not getting notifications about your upcoming chat, even though I look at YouTube every day. Is there anything you can do to facilitate that? I have no idea, Yvette and Jorgen. All I know is whenever you subscribe, there's a wee bell thing. It says if you click that, you should get notifications. I have no idea how it works other than that. I wouldn't know what to do on my end either. If you have the wee bell thing clicked, maybe you'll get a notification that something's come through. And how do you maybe look at how you get your notifications? Is it through to your phone? Does it come by email or something? Because you might have some preference setting there. You're talking to someone that still lives in the 20th century. I'm still thinking analog. I don't really know enough. But it could be some other than clicking the wee bell to get the notifications. I'm really not sure. So try that, because you might have clicked subscribe, but you didn't click the wee bell thing. Try that and see if that makes a difference. Where do we get to? If I had a brain that works, I might have pursued this profession, which is blessed so many. Yeah, well, it works. It just doesn't work as sharp as I'd like it to. Okay, thank you anyway. Where do we go? Narcs create cult. Yeah, Carl, yeah, you're right. Most cult leaders you will find have very, very high narcissistic traits. A lot of psychopathy involved, a lot of histrionic stuff going on there as well. Sometimes, depending on the cult, you have sadism as well. Very Machiavellian, very, very manipulative. But the cult leader, there's a lot of narcissism. Again, the entitlement, the need for admiration, the belief that they're superior, all the followers want to be like them, and so on. So yeah, there is a lot of narcissism with cult leaders. Why do narcissists stalk? I wouldn't say it's exclusively narcissists. Again, there could be antisocial stuff going on. I did a video about stalking, and I thought it was interesting. Again, when I was looking at the research, the biggest kind of stalker, well, there are different kinds of stalking. Sometimes someone might just every now and again check up on an ex or something like that, or a famous person, go online, see what they're up to. That's more curiosity, if you will. It doesn't go any further than that. It doesn't have to be an obsession. It doesn't have to be anything malignant or malicious going on. But that goes right up to when there are threats and things like that, and someone is in real danger. But I thought it was interesting that the biggest kind of stalker is the ex-partner. They could be the jilted ex. They're continually following to see what their ex is up to. Who are they with now? What are they up to? Social media has made stalking so much easier. It's the thing, you can block something, block someone. They might have a dozen different accounts and you wouldn't know who they were. The internet has allowed for anonymity, which is why you get a lot of trolls and so on. But it's not necessarily narcissists who stalk. As I say, ex-partners, jilted partners, broken-hearted people. Then there are the malignant kind as well that are just obsessed. They want information, anything at all that they can use somehow. That belief, knowledge gives them power or whatever. They might get a sense of gratification that the other person doesn't know they're being stalked because they're doing it from a distance. They're never actually contacting them. But there are many, many different kinds of stalker. Do narcissistic people stalk? Yeah, of course they do. Not all of them, but they would do it probably for the same reasons others do. They're angry. They want some kind of revenge. They're desperately trying to get information. They could be data mining, going through, I thought this was an interesting term, offense archaeology. They might be stalking someone on many different platforms, trying to find something that they have done or said that they can attack them for, evidence that they're horrible people, whatever. So there are many different reasons, many different kinds. And it's not just exclusive to narcissists. Let me see. Is someone who constantly repeats the same thing multiple times a form of manipulation? It can be. It depends on the context. If you ask someone not to do something and they keep on doing it, it could be not so much manipulation, maybe a different form of manipulation. It could be what they're doing is they're trying to grind you down just till you accept it. Or at the other end of that, I don't mean to be unkind, it could just be stupidity. Again, comes down to the person, comes down to the motivation. There we go. So I'm coming up to 9 o'clock and only take maybe one or two more questions. So let me see anything coming up with a question mark. Okay. Right, I think I've come to the end of the questions. Everyone's having a little chat here, which is fair enough. And sometimes I feel like I'm interrupting if I jump into someone's chat. Again, this is what happens when you were raised in the 20th century. You had good manners drilled into you from a young age, whether you wanted them or not. Okay, so again, just to recap from earlier, I thank everyone for joining me this evening. I hope you got something interesting from this. Remember, when you're being manipulated, a lot of the time it is your emotions that are being targeted. Things like your guilt, your shame, your embarrassment, your excitement, things like that. The three main ones I outlined this evening were your fear. Your fear is manipulated. The fear of the consequences, what will happen if you don't do whatever it is they're saying. Your guilt is targeted. You're a bad person. Terrible things will happen. No one's going to like you. How could you, etc., etc. And lastly, it is your sense of duty, your sense of obligation that you have to. These are things that you are responsible for, and terrible things would happen because only you can save the world, and you're too horrible and selfish to do anything about it. Tomorrow evening, as I say, 6:30 video coming out looking at what is it happens to people after being narcissistically abused for a prolonged period of time. What's going on with them that they overshare information, they over-explain themselves, and they over-apologize. They apologize for things that aren't even their responsibility, nothing to apologize for, but they do it anyway. So tomorrow I'm looking at the impact, looking at the impact of narcissistic abuse, what that does to people to rewire their brains when they're in those environments, those situations, how that affects their communication and their interaction with other people. I'm looking at the underlying stuff, the trauma responses that come, the safety-seeking behaviors. But I'm also putting into the video some things, some ideas to help you heal from that and to move forward. So, as always, thanks for joining me. As always, I'm glad you were able to join me, and I'm glad you found something helpful this evening. I will be back again next Sunday night. Don't know what the topic's going to be, but I'm sure something interesting will come up. If I can't think of anything, I'll do what I normally do, and I will just put it out there, and I will ask people what would they like me to talk about. So between now and then, everybody look after yourselves and take care. Bye now.